Thanks, Dan. Thanks, John. We're going to stick to the same subject over the next half hour or so. It's talking about unlocking mobile consumer data, subscriber data. We're going to have a panel this time, and we have 4 people. First of all is Lisa Peterson. She's the Director of Marketing for Nustar. We're bringing Mikhail Wiegelt back from T-Mobile, who's coming on up. Sean Grower, he's the COO and co-founder, along with Will of Link Analytics in Atlanta. And finally, we have Jack Philbin. Jack is the CEO of Vibes, a mobile marketing and messaging company. So come on up, Jack.
That's good. Whoa.
So one of the interesting things about the last presentation and this presentation is this whole subject, as we all know, of actually taking the data of subscribers, mobile subscribers, making it a monetary benefit for either a brand or an agency or the carrier itself. Interestingly, I think in the last, six months or a year, all 3 carriers have launched mobile marketing initiatives. I think Sprint's is called Pinsight. Verizon is called Precision Marketing, and I think AT&T just launched Blueprint, which I think is something that the panel should probably want to talk about, since this is all part of the milieu of what we're moving to. So before we get to questions and topics, and feel free to toss in yourself, I'm going to ask each panelist just to give a minute overview or 2-minute overview about your company, about what you do in this ecosystem, and then what your position is at the company. So Lisa, why don't we start with you?
Okay. So Nustar is a company that was founded on solving a business problem for operators about 17 years ago. And that was enabling businesses and consumers to be able to port their number from a service provider. So in order to do that, Nustar, the NEU in Nustar stands for neutral. A neutral entity was required to enable that and safeguard data from the operator. So we run that business fairly at arm's length. We tap into that data, or we allow businesses to tap into that data for routing purposes. So we serve a large number of the messaging aggregators to simply enable them to route the message to the right operator. From that business, we expanded on to more registry-type businesses. So we provide internet DNS services. We provide an IP geolocation registry service. And then more recently, the part of the organization that I sit in is Nustar Information Services. And Nustar Information Services was a result of an acquisition of a company that was in the business of providing information and analytics for businesses to enable the business to essentially protect their business or promote their business. So in the area of protect, we provide verification services for risk management. So we provide scoring on name, linkages to address and phone number and emails, so they can identify risk if those don't correlate well. And then on the promote side, we provide advertising solutions for audience targeting, leveraging our data and insights, as well as for marketers to tap into over 15,000 insights that we have to enable them to better plan and execute.
Sean?
Yeah, I think Will gave a pretty good introduction to Link Analytics this morning, but we're an analytics technology company that is focused on customer and competitive intelligence on that side, and then network intelligence on the other side, routing and software-defined networking. Our partnership with Nustar Information Services started when they were, prior to that, when Nustar Information Services was Targus Info, where we observe in call detail records sometimes 300 million mobile numbers in a month, right? But all we get inside that call detail record is information about who that person is, well, not who they are, but what their mobile number is, maybe where they are, maybe who their friends are. What Nustar has is an amazing capability to take the mobile numbers and append information about them. So things like segmentation and demographics and what are the attitudes and preferences of these people. And so if you think about the social network analytics that Will was talking about earlier in competitive intelligence, we can create with our technology, we can create sort of the how many, and then we integrate with Nustar information services to tell what these people really look like.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Michael Weigelt. I'm the Director Operational Intelligence Insights, former customer intelligence for T-Mobile, our fourth largest carrier in the US. And my work is mostly, I guess for this panel, on the CRM space. My team, among other things, is developing lots of customer propensity models and doing analytics on the customer level.
Hey, good afternoon. So I'm Jack Philbin. I'm co-founder and CEO of Vibes. We're a mobile marketing technology company based in Chicago. We have a MRM, which is a term we sort of coined, a mobile relationship management platform. What that means is it's a fancy way of saying mobile CRM, but we thought CRM, could mean Oracle or Salesforce or even Epsilon, ExactTarget, and we thought MRM would be more specific. I'm up here almost as the representative of the brand, so we license our Catapult platform to brands, specifically retailers. We've been in business for almost 15 years, about 100 people in the company, and we're starting to see sort of chief marketing officers and brands really start to do more than dip their toe in the water. Everybody's sort of proven out they know that they need to do mobile, so they're getting serious and developing a real mobile strategy. And so we come in, at the front end of that, try and help them develop their mobile strategy, but then also try and provide the tools and the platform so that they can do campaign management. And we'll get into sort of what that means. I'll provide some use cases.
Okay. Okay, so what my first question is for you guys is listening to this and watching the last presentation, how close are we from the operators really, fulfilling this dream that you four here have? I mean, how close are we? Are we within? Is it a tidal wave that's coming, or is it something that's just hard to get the carriers? And I'm talking about all the carriers really, on board with what you're trying to achieve.
I'll just take a first run at this. So I did work at a mobile operator for 9 years, and that was Sprint Nextel. I was on the Nextel side, and I remember going through all of this, launching location-based services and exposing mobile location. And we were a little bit more aggressive in that we were one of the first to do it, and it took some of the larger operators much more time to get comfortable with exposing mobile location. So I almost see this as the next generation. And Jack and I have been in mobile for quite a long time. Jack has an expert team focused on tapping into mobile for marketing and advertising. But I think this is the year more than ever that I've seen before in mobile marketing and advertising, that need for targeting. So it's more than just about eyeballs now, it's about relevance. And I think that's where we see the mobile operators now coming in, where they weren't part of the internet value chain and marketing, commerce, and advertising. Now with mobile, they have a chance to insert themselves into that value chain. But I still think there's a lot to do. We have gone through that on the Nustar side. It took almost 10 years to get to where we were or are. So I see, a lot of that having to now develop inside the operator. So just having the data is one thing, but making it meaningful and actionable is something else.
You guys have anything to add to that?
I think we're getting better and better at using anonymized data to make it more relevant to a very targeted audience, and I think that's a function of just having more and more data and having almost data on everyone, right? Even if it's anonymized, you can create buckets and groups of people and use that for retargeting. So even if it's not one-to-one, it's one to a few as opposed to one to a very large group before.
Yeah, I guess at least from T-Mobile side, as far as I'm involved, I guess we're very concerned about privacy. And to what extent some information is given out and how to use it properly. I think there's a general feeling that it's somewhat creepy if we give too much information out, and if the customer notices that, well, how much the rest of the world really knows about their details of their lives. And so I think we all have to make a very careful balance, kind of to what extent we want to use this information. I think to a large extent it will require efforts to opt in a lot of our customers. Unless we get the formal buy-in from our customers, I don't think we will succeed as much as we want to.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, I think going back to how far away are we, I think
Yeah.
the harsh reality is it's probably further than all of us want.
It always is.
There's like this crawl, walk, run, right? And there's a lot of people crawling. There's not a lot of people doing deep integration with CRM systems that you can leverage that data. I think, if you just look at the macro thesis, the carriers are saying, let's create these, brand new revenue stream and leverage all the data that we have. That's sort of a no-brainer, right? And so I don't think anybody could specifically describe the monetization model for, any of the carrier initiatives right now. It's sort of like, hey, we know we want to monetize this data. Let's create a team and go figure that out. But it really hasn't been sort of roadmapped yet.
Oh, interesting.
And I think one other thing is we've expanded overseas. I would put the United States in sort of middle of the road from a privacy perspective, whereas before we tried our expansions into Western Europe, we thought that the privacy laws in the U.S. were the most restrictive, and what we found is that's not the case. In Western Europe, and especially in places like Germany and others, it's far more restrictive than it is here in the United States. And then there's other places in parts of Asia and Latin America and other places where it's less restrictive, and those are places where I think we'll be able to do more quickly, and maybe those create case studies to help with the momentum.
Okay, so we've heard this, we saw the presentation before. No one's really focusing on the challenges to actually pull this off. So let me just open that up to what are the challenges that you're seeing in your respective areas that are actually impeding this? Because it looks great on a PowerPoint,
Right.
but I would hazard to guess that there's a lot involved that can derail this whole new revenue opportunity for the carriers. So, anyone jump in?
I think from our perspective, it's trying to bring all the data together, right? Because if we're trying to get as specific as we're talking about getting on people, that means getting data from multiple groups inside a carrier. And the challenge is related to how do all those databases talk to each other? What's the timing? How do we integrate it together, and get all those groups to work together to agree to create some big federated data mart of all this stuff that can be used is I think a big challenge that we see with all of our clients.
Well, how successful have you been to get more than 3 from different business units in a room together to talk about this?
It's, you start with 2, and then you go from there, and as people start to see how valuable this data can be for specific solutions, then you get cooperation. And without speaking specifically to what clients we work with, we do work with some of the biggest networks here in the United States. One is much better than the other at that, and I think that as you get bigger and bigger, it's harder to get groups together.
Huh. Okay. Lisa?
Well, I think, kind of what you're saying, connecting the dots is a big challenge. So the vision might be there, but then how do the operators tactically go about it? Because really, when it comes to what the marketplace needs, the markets are looking for problems to be solved. So you can't start with the technology just because it's possible, okay, let's do this. Let's really understand how the businesses want to tap into this data, and likely it will be different depending on what vertical you're speaking with.
Right.
And so we've had to go through that, and we do a lot of custom analysis for our customers. versus just a cookie cutter approach, which won't work.
Mhm.
Well, I guess from my perspective, I think there are substantial challenges from a corporate culture perspective, regardless if we had the technology under control or not. Just to get, I mean, all these big telecommunication companies, they're not Google and they're not Amazon, and they don't get their stuff together that quickly. So I wouldn't hold my breath that we can get something like this off the ground that quickly. Even if there's all kinds of potential on there, just from the size of the companies and the background, how they go about doing their business, I think it will be fairly difficult to drive to some big leaps forward quickly. So I think technology, that's fine. Getting some of the organizational issues sorted out, I think it's much more of a challenge.
And for a carrier, obviously, there's a lot more risk in the public domain. I mean,
Oh, yeah?
you know, Lisa, there's an article in the Wall Street Journal, I think today, about telecom carriers selling their data, et cetera. And I read it, it's not a positive spin. So, I think you have a lot more at risk than, say, maybe in Amazon. So.
Well, and I think the carriers have to weigh how much money can you really make from this data. I mean, they're making billions of dollars every month on their subscribers, so
Right.
you really want to put that at risk and try to monetize their data in some other way. Is the revenue so significant that makes sense to do? And I don't know if we...
That's a big risk, right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, that was my next question. Is revenue the thing that's driving this trend, or is it something else like customer experience or understanding their own internal things or their customers better themselves? Could that be a driving force or?
Well, I'll just pop in. I think it's important to clarify, there's a different, we've been talking about two things without sort of identifying. There's a model where the carrier can sell or monetize aggregate data. That doesn't necessarily appear as a mobile facing consumer experience, right? That's just going to be an aggregate data model. And then there's leveraging this data such that I get a more targeted, more personal experience that's more interesting to me because it's leveraging data about my past purchase history or maybe my location.
Right.
And so those are two very fundamentally different businesses. One's more of a research and data play, and one is for creating better mobile experiences. And both have the challenges. I just thought I'd sort of frame that out as, we could talk about either of those as different and distinct categories for the model.
Well, and I think one change that has been made, the operators have changed their privacy policies to make some of this information fair use in aggregate for certain use cases. And so that is disclosed. I think most of them have an opt-out on that. There might be some differences and nuances between all of them. But then you have the experience where I'm going to use your information now for this purpose to serve you an ad that pretty much are still leaning towards the opt-in. And that goes back to the regulatory environment that they're in. So under the FCC, very different from Google's governance,
Right.
is that they cannot expose what's called customer proprietary network information. So anything derived from the network, they have to have opt-in and consent for all of that for marketing purposes.
Even if it's anonymized?
Yes, even if it's anonymized. So the gray area is the data. So call records coming over the network, that's the traditional voice, that is governed. Data becomes a grayer area, so internet services. I mean, maybe, I don't know if you could.
I think that's true, but I think regardless what the legal restrictions are, there are, I think, very different expectations by the consumer relative to Google and any of the carriers. I mean, with Google, you're interacting and you know that you talk to Google. It's not that clear when I go on my phone and I go to a website that somebody else, like the carrier, is actually watching me and recording what I'm doing and where I'm going. To me, that really feels as if whatever, somebody is going through my garbage and scanning what I'm doing and don't sell it then later and then, oh look, he's whatever, drinking certain kind of wine and making a different offer. So it's a very different perspective from the subscriber, that they're not really aware of what is all recorded when I'm interacting with Google or Amazon. I know I clicked on this and I expect them to give me a recommendation. So therefore, I think it's, regardless of the legal requirements, I think we need an opt-in before we can really use this kind of information, at least on a subscriber-specific level.
Yeah. Yeah, and another version of the talk that Will gave this morning, the emphasis is on, if people get something back, then they're more willing to give. And so to the extent that we can improve the customer experience, then that should be first, and then the people are more willing to give the data, and then the carriers can make some money off of it. Because, look, let's face it, the carriers are in it to make money one way or another, whether that's
Right.
improving customer experience or selling the data.
But it seems to be the customer experience model would be the lead dog in the chain here, I
If
think.
you want to, it's the path of least resistance with your customers.
Right.
If they know that you're using their data for something else.
Well, the way this is happening right now, we build and maintain mobile databases for brand clients, right? And so it's happening on a client-by-client basis. I don't know if the carriers will sort of be like this, build the master opt-in model. We've talked about it for years. It's extremely complex. There's tons of friction and tons of reasons, not to do it. So I think that, the precision and Pinsight it's a different approach. So it's not about let's build a opt-in base that we can then, monetize and send ads to or somehow engage with. Rather it's, hey, we have this treasure trove of data and let's go monetize that, which isn't necessarily the same as building a, opt-in user database. That's just happening. That's been happening for years as mobile, marketing has sort of emerged, and individual retailers, like we run the Gap Mobile VIP Club. That's Gap's, and
Right.
people opt into that because they're Gap shoppers.
I think you just hit on something though. So the challenge is even, to come up with a more Google-like model to take that approach would mean potentially working together. So the operators to create scale for the enterprises that could entail those coming together. So that's a challenge too, in and
Right.
of itself.
And then
Because
that's
each
not
one
what
is
they're doing
its own
now.
island, and each one has its own standards and rules on how they would even expose this
Right.
information.
And the brands would pay up to provide their consumers those better experiences, right? So.
Does anybody have any questions for our panel before I go on? Yes, sir.
Yeah, can you comment as to why the mobile advertising revenues are still so low? And even on a per ad basis, they're low. Everything we've ever seen shows that mobile advertising has greater relevance, more likely for click-through, more likely to buy, and yet, even after all this, it still is where it is. So maybe two parts. Number one, why, and number two, do you see it changing?
So there are challenges. So anything to get investment in something, like as we've seen in the online space, you have to be able to measure. And there are a lot of issues that in mobile, there is a lack of measurement and a lack of standards. So it's very hard to be able to tell a brand what their ROI was for their mobile advertising investment. And also the holy grail of one-to-one measurement, one-to-one marketing is really not there because of the privacy concerns and the ability to really target well. So it's evolving, and companies like Jack's are helping it to evolve, but like I've said, I think the first wave of it has been more about eyeballs, and therefore there's more inventory out there than demand, and that's put some pressure. So until we can raise the targeting and the ROIs up, that's when it'll start to rise again. I don't know.
Yeah, not as very good answer. It's a combination of a lot of things. I think one we don't want to hear about is just inertia. Like the buying machine, the big media buying companies in New York, they're not the mobile experts, right? And so,
But why is
the
that?
machine is selling TV. All the money gets poured into TV, and print, you're seeing print, decline. But there's that great. It was on the cover of Ad Age. It's, analog dollars become digital dimes, which become mobile pennies, and makes everybody sad.
That's interesting, but is there do you have any understanding as to why it's that way? Is that a corporate culture thing back to our, what we were talking about earlier with the carriers? It's just their corporate culture that they act this way, they're slower, they're more deliberative. Is that the same way with the media buying machine?
Yeah, I mean, that's why you have, successful, Millennial has done really well, scaling to, IPO from basically, they launched maybe in 06. And so it's these mobile-specific experts that I think are needed to drive the market. That's my best take.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll ask another one.
I have one more. I don't want to beat it down there, but I have a great one maybe from Bill. Can you, as an operator, take the data that you're gathering, and do you feel that you can sort of ignore the privacy issue if it's for the purposes of monetizing, purposes of improving your network for optimization purposes, or even for advertising back to your customers, for example, figuring out where to put up a billboard, or where to do who's using iPhone 3s and therefore should be selling them iPhone 4s as they're coming out, or 5 inches, or whatever the number might be at the time. Do you feel that you're still constrained even in those circumstances to use the data?
In general, we're relatively unconstrained. There are some details where we don't take advantage of that. For example, of course, we have the ability to record exactly to what website you're going, or some other details. We will not use that for targeting or for specific offers. There are some attributes like whatever current handset you're using, and I think that is fair use, and the consumer would expect that. Some other services where basically we as a carrier, we're only considered the conduit, like what website they're going, that is something that probably we wouldn't use, and then we would only deal with this kind of in the aggregate.
Anything else? No?
Can I add to Lisa's point on basically tracking and ROI? So Apple came out with Passbook as part of iOS 6 in September. Not a lot of fanfare, but I think it's going to be a revolution. I really do. So all the mobile marketing that's been happening and sort of I'd say getting the flywheel spinning, you're able to close the loop, track redemption when somebody's got something in their mobile wallet, and then they can go into a store and scan that at point of sale. So the fact that Starbucks has 10% of their transactions nationally, through the app or through Passbook is pretty staggering. And so I think while we have quote unquote slow adoption, all the retailers want to go there. So I'm not going to carry paper coupons, but if I can just chuck them and save them into my wallet, that's extremely convenient. And then if I'm near that, the location, and a very subtle reminder pops up, remember you have a 20% off discount here in your wallet, I can either ignore that, and that's the 100-meter sort of radius wherever you sort of flag the location. That's really, really powerful. And so Google Wallet basically is launching similar capabilities to Passbook. And what this gives everybody is the ability to just save things into their phone, which is going to really help the ROI and the tracking story, which is just going to help money get shifted faster.
But none of that has any data from the operator, correct?
True.
Well, and this is where, so So location is something interesting, an interesting asset that the operators have. I mean, you literally do see every movement of every device on every cell tower. So being able to tap in and maybe even look at closed loop measurement a little bit differently. Did I actually, did the retailer get the person into the store, and being able to give the retailer that kind of information back from the operator network? I mean, those are interesting use cases, and I think, you know, that is an interesting asset. That's all that the operators
Location
have.
is location is a huge differentiator. It's not the only thing, right? I think context is about appropriateness, and location is one item that adds to that appropriateness. I don't know. Location, it's a carrier asset, but there needs to be better ways to unlock that
Yes,
power.
how to tap into it.
Well, I guess the question is it really a carrier asset, though, when you look at something like Facebook, right? Who, they essentially know where you are almost all the time. And with the scale that they have now, and I think a lot more freedom to do some things with that data versus the carriers who are somewhat restricted in terms of what they can actually do with location data.
Right.
Now, and to Will's point this morning, every time you install an app, you're essentially consenting to that app, allowing them to know exactly where you are. And so the app providers, as not being regulated as a carrier, I think are probably more able to do stuff with that than the carriers, I think.
Probably. I want to direct this question to the two data guys. This whole day and the day that, that we've been talking about this, what is the reality in the offices? You don't have to be so specific about you, Mikhail, but when you go to these offices, what is the reality about pulling the data from all other places, all the places in the company, and what is the reality, back to what Will was saying earlier about this analytics talent, that needs to be brought forth and nurtured? What's the reality on the ground when it comes to those kinds of people in the carriers who understand what we're talking about or want to?
So I think the incremental value of analytics, the techniques are tried and true. They're probably not going to change that much. I think we've seen some new approaches with social network analysis that just based upon scale we can only do now. But the value comes from new data. It doesn't come from new analytical approaches. And to do that, you're probably digging into databases that have never been intended to be used for marketing or advertising before. Take call detail records, for example, created almost exclusively for billing. But the amount of information that's in there that can bring value to analytical engagements is huge, but they're not built for that. Some of the things that we have to do every month just to try to get things ready for either predictive analytics or competitive intelligence, where we're essentially force-fitting the usage of that data and the infrastructure that data exists in, and force-fitting our solutions into there. And that's a real challenge. And that's going to continue. I mean, we're now looking at beyond CDRs, things like SS7 data and all the things that people use that gets created when someone interacts with the network. But that's not ready for marketing analytics, and that's where we're trying to push ahead because we see that to be the.
That's interesting. It's not ready yet.
Well, we're getting there, right? But
Right.
It's there's so much untapped data that I think only now do we have the horsepower to actually do something with it. So.
Yeah, I mean, we're using Link Analytics to do a lot of this work. So I guess it works out for us. I don't see it as such a huge problem. I guess we just, as we come up with new ideas, what data to use. So when there is something in the CDR records that we want to now investigate, fine. We come up with ideas how to aggregate it and bring it over into an analytic data set. I think that is a very normal process, and we all have to get used to it, that this will happen continuously, that we will discover new data sources that are not built for marketing, that are not built for analytics, and there will be lots of loading and transformation and cleanup that needs to happen just as a standard standard of business.
But you're using that data for customer satisfaction, right?
For
Like churn management.
Sure.
Upgrades.
Sure.
All that. Yeah. So then, begs the question of, that's great, but then does the operator want to take that data and then create a new business unit monetization where there's external monies coming into the
Right.
operator? It's a new business.
And I think also what's happening is that data is getting out there anyway from all of the apps that we use, people putting phone numbers in their name. So all of what you would say maybe is your customer data is actually also available now in many apps too. And that world does not have the same restrictions.
Right.
I mean, everyone wants to self-regulate and follow best practices, but the restrictions are very different, so.
And to Mikhail's point, I think T-Mobile is incredibly well equipped to handle this wave of data. And I think as the carriers get bigger, it gets harder and harder to get all those groups together to talk. And a lot of if you look at AT&T and Verizon, they came from landline. There's a lot of regulation, and there's just a lot of different thinking. Not to say whether it's right or wrong, but T-Mobile is extremely entrepreneurial as a carrier, and I think that benefits them.
Interesting. Any questions before I move on? Anybody else? Well, in our last, one more question. So if you can give me any use cases of anybody really using this data in an unusual way that we haven't seen before, or failing that, give me an idea of what you think we'll be talking about in 3 years. Will we be still talking about this like we hope it's going to be out there, or are we going to be talking about that mobile analytics for a subscriber has just replaced Google Analytics as the advertising dream of all time? Is it?
Well, I mean, the operators have announced, I think Sprint announced something with Time recently that they did almost, it's like an exchange model in a way where Time is providing content on the Sprint Zone site, and then Sprint and Site Media is providing them audience targeting advertising solutions. So, I think we'll start to see some more of those announcements that they're happening out there. It is around more advertising than just accessing raw data feeds from the operators.
Right.
In 3 years, I think the industry is going to start to get over all of this, and we'll get used to back to having some incentive to provide your information. I think we'll start to see more of that. So anything that helps me save money, makes things more convenient for me, I'm willing to maybe trade off some of my data for a better experience.
And I'm not sure we're going to see some big event where all of a sudden customer experience is better, churn drops, everyone's happy, and you can just have my data and do what you want with it, right? But I think that the carriers will just continue to evolve and get better and better at the things they do. It's going to be incremental steps. I think in 3 years we'll be doing things a lot better with a lot more data, a lot more technology, but it's not going to be a sudden epiphany. It's just going to evolve.
Right.
But clearly, just based on having started Link Analytics 3 years ago and thinking about what we do now, how fast we do it versus how we did when we started the company, if we continue down that track, it will be significant because it has been in the last 3 years.
Huh.
I guess from my perspective, I would be surprised if Google Analytics gets replaced. There will be some serious efforts, maybe in a year or 1.5, and something that. But I don't see that there would be anything to the scale that we really could say that we switched over to some mobile marketing world. 5 years, 10 years, maybe.
5 years, 10 years, maybe?
Well, I'm very bullish on the personalization and sort of the advancement from, a one-size-fits-all mobile experience or marketing approach. The next phase is really customer segments, right? And so different buckets of people are tagged and ID'd, and they get a certain experience. And I think we will get to, the reality of very specific one-to-one experiences, such that based on who you are, your past purchase history, your purchase intent, you're getting the right experience and the age-old, right message, right person, right time, right place. I think, there's three things that make a mobile program compelling. That's time, location, and interaction. And so you can leverage those three today. And so the smartest marketers are starting to do that already. And the more they can sort of augment those experiences for their customers with data from third-party data providers or from carriers as they get into that business, the faster they're going to move, the better their return is going to be.
Good. Any questions, anybody? Go ahead.
I'd like to ask Joe. So, under T-Mobile, you have some MVNO such as Global Smart, Quinton Mobile. So, for example, you have customer database. So, would you use that customer database in your analysis tool, or is that legal or not legal to use your
Okay, so I'm not a lawyer. I couldn't answer that.
Well, I can just based on working with carriers here in the United States.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question is, as MVNOs get bigger and bigger, can you use the information that you have as a function of them riding on your network to essentially market to them and target them? And I think the answer is, the carriers typically look at that and say that they're a competitor. The MVNOs are a direct competitor with their own branded products. And the MVNOs would say the same thing. So not a lot goes on with, or nothing goes on in terms of a carrier marketing specifically to an MVNO in the United States.
Does that answer your question? Any more?
I have one question. I'm interested to hear about maybe examples of data analytics applied to some marketing campaign or something, which has proven that small works or selling better product.
So is there a use case or some,
Some examples.
that shows that works, this kind of, mobile marketing and highly segmented metrics actually achieve something?
Well, I mean, we do marketing campaigns every day. So every month we have something like 70, 80 marketing campaigns. And a lot of them are based on customer-specific models. One of the most exciting, coolest example would be the social networking analysis that was mentioned earlier today, where we take the CDR records, we identify communities, and within the communities we identify leaders and followers. And as it turns out, you get substantial benefit by targeting the leaders, and then you see the effect popping up with the followers. So you can save quite a bit of marketing dollars and give higher offers, better offers to the leaders, expecting results with the followers.
And that specific approach to analytics is something that we started looking at even before we started Link. Probably it started to become somewhat popular in 06 and 07, but not very well. I mean, it was a great idea, but only the techniques and the technology have improved. And social network analysis as a viral marketing tool for the carriers is becoming very big as a function of better data, better technology, and better analytical approaches.
We have some case studies out there more on the mobile advertising side where our data was used for finding the right audience so the ad network could deliver the right ad at the right time and place. They were actually a location-based ad network, and they saw click-through rates that were 5 to 10x higher when data was applied.
Yeah, and on that, it's important to distinguish between upper funnel and lower funnel.
Yep.
All right, so upper funnel being the way that you're going to acquire customers through mostly advertising programs, and lower funnel being the engagement. So after they've clicked on a banner ad, like what's the experience that they're going to go see? And just one example that's kind of recent and fun, we do the mobile loyalty for Build-A-Bear. They're one of our beta clients in our Passbook beta program. And so there's this, I'm not sure if anybody's gone to Build-A-Bear and purchased a bear, and it's kind of like really interesting because you can purchase outfits for your bear and whatnot. And so they know the names of the bears that people buy. And so we've been able to personalize the pass that people load into their wallet for the outfit that they have for the bear. So the bear's name is on that. And that's just really very targeted. And so of all the people in the mobile loyalty database, everybody's getting that very personal experience. And that, technology just runs that all.
Great. Any more? All right, well, I appreciate it very much. Thank you, gentlemen.